The views expressed on the Nova Society are those of the panelists and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Phoenix Research Institute or any institution which any panel member is associated.
I'd like to welcome everyone back to the Nova Society. I'm your host, Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, and I'm here with the panel, Dr. Scott Gersher and Dr. Mark Bound. Today we're going to be looking at some current issues in the news that are occupying our minds and are probably on your mind as well. How about Netanyahu's plan to take over all of Gaza? That has been something that I've been seeing. Do you want to look at that? Or is there something else that you'd rather
What do you think, Scott?
discuss?
Sure. Let's talk
why
about
not?
we'll talk about anything.
We were
that.
going to do that in the first part of this session, but we decided to talk about the Mets instead.
Good.
Well, let's ask this. Good idea or bad idea, Scott?
And what will it look like?
So are we talking about the takeover of Gaza City or all of Gaza? I just want to be clear what we're discussing about.
I think they're talking about Gaza City.
I thought it was all of Gaza. No?
I understood it to be Gaza City. Maybe I could be wrong, but what I've read and what has come out, I thought they were talking about Gaza City only. I don't know.
Oh, I thought they were talking about all of Gaza. I could be wrong. I could be quite wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if anybody has articulated a plan yet for Gaza, right? For the Gaza Strip. My understanding, as best I can get it, is that they're hoping that other Arab countries will come in and agree to be police force of some kind for the entire Gaza Strip, and that, that would be the thing to keep the peace there.
A coalition.
Yeah, like something like that, like a group of different Arab countries. Now, why they would want to do that, really not sure. I mean, I no, as far as I can tell, nobody has asked anybody to do it, and they're just kind of saying, well, yeah, maybe the rest of the Arab world will step in and take over Gaza again.
You mean Israel is hoping for this, or the Palestinians?
I think that this was part of the Trump plan, right? Is that we're gonna? So Trump had a two-step plan. One was to basically internationalize Gaza and turn it into some kind of Atlantic City, right?
Yeah, I remember that.
And that a lot of the people who live there now would be happy to leave there to go somewhere better, and where that somewhere better is, nobody can say. I'm assuming he doesn't mean here in the United States, but that they would vacate Gaza, the Gaza Strip, and allow hotel builders to come in and build casinos and hotels and things like that.
For him, that his company would do that.
I guess, or friends of his or whoever it is. I mean, I think that they had the same plan in Puerto Rico after the hurricane. They were talking about a very similar thing. I'm not sure how that all went, but I don't think that other Arab countries would be willing to put troops in harm's way as long as the people of Gaza and their militias, fighting forces, terrorists, whatever you want to call them, are still actively trying to hold on to the land, which of course they've been doing now for 109 years or something like that. So I don't think that there's a good plan out there for the entire Gaza Strip or anybody else. My understanding was that Netanyahu wants to take over the Israeli military to take over Gaza City, and the military doesn't want to do that. And we don't know exactly how all that's going to turn out. But my guess is that the security cabinet and the Israeli military will prevent them from doing that, because it would be a military disaster for Israel and, of course, the people who live there. So my guess is that this is just a proposal on the part of Netanyahu. He wants to move everybody down south further towards like Rafah or Khan Yunis, take over Gaza City, presumably dig underground, find out where people were hiding, if there are hostages in there, free them. I'm not really sure what the whole, what the game plan is. I don't think it's been articulated, but continuing to displace people of Gaza for supposed security concerns. And yeah, I just don't see it happen.
No. And right, the AP is now reporting that Israel is in discussions with South Sudan about possibly resettling Palestinians from the Gaza Strip from one war-torn area to another, because South Sudan has always been having an issue. So, of course, a lot of people are rejecting that idea because you're in one area where you've got starvation and you're in having a war going on, and South Sudan has never been the safest place in the world either. They have the same amount of problems. So, again, it seems just to be shifting things from one area to another. And I've always said it's easy sometimes to take over a place. It's a lot harder to hold on to it. And I think that, we've seen that so many times.
Yeah. I mean, look at Iraq.
Absolutely.
It took a long time. A lot of U.S. service people got killed in Iraq trying to calm that place down. Exactly. And it was only when they co-opted basically or won the support of the people there that they were able to make any inroads at all into making the place safe. Now what you're doing is a hostile takeover. Hamas, probably for the most part, is a spent force, but they're going to continue to recruit people to continue to fight for them. They're not, they would never eliminate suicide bombings and things like that. I hope Trump understands the lessons of Beirut. What happened to our military, our Marines there. This is not something that we want to get mixed up in. We don't want to be the peacekeeper in Gaza. I don't think any other country wants to be the peacekeeper in Gaza. So this is going to continue on for a while. The way it's going right now with just shifting populations from one place to another, trying to clear out as much as they possibly can. I don't know why they've been doing this with troops rather than like drones and robots and things like that. I don't think anybody knows really anything that's going on down there from either side. There is, if truth is the first casualty of war, truth got killed in the first week of this one.
Absolutely.
And there's been nothing from either side since. So
yeah, and the AP is reporting, this is quotes from Netanyahu. Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he wants to realize U.S. President Donald Trump's vision of relocating much of Gaza's population through what Netanyahu refers to as voluntary migration. Israel has floated similar resettlement proposals with other African nations. This is Netanyahu talking. A quote, I think that the right thing to do, even according to the laws of war as I know them, is to allow the population to leave, and then you go in with all your might against the enemy who remains there.
Voluntary.
Which is something what we discussed before. That's why if you're Hamas, you don't want the population to go anywhere. Because if they do, you don't have those shields. Then Israel can come in and take it over. But even if that was to happen, once again, it's easy. And as Scott points out, we showed it in Iraq. We've shown it in so many places, not only the United States but other nations, where you take over somebody else, and it's just so difficult to hold on to, and because it's like getting in a fight between two brothers. The guy that comes in between two brothers to break up the fight, both of them are going to turn on him. That's just kind of the way it goes. And I think I think this is a horrible idea. Personally, I think the idea of moving them to South Sudan or any other African nation, I would say to those African nations, even those that are not in war or in conflict, I would think twice about letting the Palestinians in. Because we have seen before that the Palestinians are not good neighbors. Just ask the Kuwaitis; they'll tell you what they think of the Palestinians. So I would really reconsider some of this, and I don't know. Maybe Gaza, it's not the prime real estate. I mean, yeah, okay, it's got a body of water on it, but I mean, come on, it's not some prime real estate, and people live there, and regardless of how crappy it may be, this is their home, and the idea of voluntary migration. Not only does the people of Gaza have to be considered, does the Palestinians have to be considered, but let's face it, so do those other nations that are going to be those that are going to be taking in the voluntary migrants, because I think it could cause them problem and even more stability, more instability, excuse me, for those countries as well.
Yeah, and I can see where, if that were to happen, anyone who's disaffected in the African nation or nations that were to take in the Palestinians, Boko Haram extremists, for example, I don't see that there's anything precluding individuals from joining Hamas or like becoming part of a small collective. And there's nothing to prevent their trying to take Gaza back from all the lovely hotels or whatever it is that Trump thinks he's going to build. I mean, the whole thing is asking for a tremendous instability in the entire area. If they think it's bad now, forcing people away from their homes is under duress, and saying, "Oh, it's voluntary." No, that that would make the entire area far more unstable than it is now.
And I do kind of wonder. There's a couple of interesting things that are going on in the Middle East. One of which is this idea of Egypt's new administrative capital. Have you heard about this at all? It's been going on for over 10 years now. It is literally a city planned for 6 million people to live. About, I think it's 45 miles from Cairo, in the middle of a desert, and they've been building it for 10 years now. And at this point, they have built something like, I don't know, 45% of the city, most of the really big buildings, the government district, a big mosque down south. It's a planned city. It would remind you probably of like Washington, D.C. or something like that, with the way the city sort of flows. And it does remind me, it's got a big sports stadium, 93,000 seats, that they're hoping someday to move a great deal of population into this city. And I imagine that they've got all the logistics as far as getting water in and getting waste out and things like that is something that they're working on. And it reminds one, I think, that the Suez Canal was terrific 19th century infrastructure. But there's a possibility now that Egypt wants to build another canal to basically replace or complement Suez, and that it's also possible that the Israeli government with the Saudi government was going to build an enormous canal that goes from the Gulf of Aqaba to the Mediterranean, right where Gaza is. That would be this enormous public works project. It would take a very long time. Obviously, it's not even sketched out yet. What that would do is make it easier to move goods from the Arab countries, Asia, up into the Mediterranean and points west. And that's what a lot of this stuff is about when they're trying to move populations around and trying to build new cities in different places. And that it is possible to reclaim the desert. Sinai is a big, pretty empty desert, and they could start building places there. But there's no concrete proposals. Nothing says that that's what they're actually planning to do, but I have seen it raised as a possibility because the technology now exists to make moves along those lines. And of course, a very unstable Gaza would not be a place where you would want that to terminate.
No. The other thing that we have to really remember is that this all started with an attack by Hamas on Israel's soil. Moving Palestinians, the Palestinian people, to another area, no matter where it might be, if that was going to happen, we have to have some sort of discussion about the actions of the Palestinians themselves. They have got to want to live peacefully with their neighbors. They have got to want to live peacefully with the countries that they go into. And I bring up Kuwait quite often because Kuwait took in quite a few Palestinians. And when Saddam Hussein of Iraq came in and attacked Kuwait, it was the Palestinians that assisted him. And I've said this before, that has got to make nations really weary of what the Palestinians would do. And I'm not saying all Palestinians. Let's not group them all into one thing. They're not. But it is the leadership of the Palestinians seem to be very predisposed to violence, and violence against their neighbors. That's one thing, no matter where you move them to. If they keep that same kind of leadership mentality, you're just basically moving the problem from one area to the next. And maybe next time it won't be Israel that gets attacked. Maybe it'll be somebody else. It was Kuwait at one point in time. No matter where no matter what you do, no matter where you move them, heck, you can move them to Arkansas. doesn't mean that they're not going to try to get into a fight with Texas. So we've got to have that understanding that it isn't just about moving people, and it's not an across the board paint with a wide brush about Palestinians. It is Palestinian leadership, and Palestinians have shown that they are very bad at picking leaders. Now, that we're ones to be talking now because we weren't very good at ours, but they have shown they need to get those leaders who are willing to live in harmony with the countries that accept them in. They need to learn to live in harmony with, if they're given their own area, they need to live with harmony with their neighbors. And that just doesn't seem to be in their makeup. And yes, I can say that Gaza was not a perfect place in any way. In any way, was it a perfect place? A lot of that had to do with their leadership. A lot of the conflict with Israel had to do with that leadership. Now, the Israelis do have some bit of blame to take for this as well, with settlers and things like this. But again, that all comes back. You got to ask yourself, chicken or the egg? Which was it? Was the main problem the leadership of the Palestinians, or was it the actions of the Israelis? That is no longer here nor there in my mind. We're beyond all that of casting blame on somebody. We're just beyond that. We know what we need to have. We need to have a Palestinian leadership, no matter where they are, that is willing to live in harmony with the rest of society, with the rest of the world. And once you get that, I think you're going to see, to the Palestinians, I think you're going to see your lot in life get a lot better than it is today. But that's the starting point. Because if you're willing to do that, and then somebody offends you, something bad happens, hey, at least you're doing the right thing, and maybe the world will come to your aid. Who knows?
Well, they also have to be, the leadership would have to be able to control any elements within who might feel. We were talking about, was it Menachem Begin who negotiated peace and then was killed because it was in other people's interest to keep the war going? Rabin, thank you. Yitzhak Rabin. Yeah, I can never remember who it is, but I know that there was at least one, there's certainly been over time at least one leader who's been assassinated for negotiating peace. And I was thinking, Mark, and Scott also, as you were speaking, when a person grows up under threat, continuous threat, and uncertainty of not knowing when, for example, or if you're taught as a child from your earliest memory, well, the Israelis might attack us, this might happen, that might happen, this might, whatever it is. And you see older men, if you're a boy, or if you're a girl for that matter, and this might happen or that might happen, and you're taught your history from a perspective of potential violence that might happen, and you don't know when it might happen, but it might happen. The uncertainty and the continuous threat of something that might happen, that has got to have an adverse effect on a person's core psychological identity. Potential.
Yeah, true. But I do think that there is an answer to that, and I would say that the Israeli tactics are a little unsure, unclear, incoherent. Perhaps I'm not really sure. We're not really sure what's going on and why. To Mark's earlier point, this all began when Hamas attacked Israel on October 7th, 2023. In my opinion, the inciting incident for that was the speech that Netanyahu made at the UN, where he brought up the idea of having rapprochement with Saudi Arabia and with the Arab world in general, which would include a Palestinian state of some kind, the details to be worked out later. But no matter how bad and it's certainly possible that infrastructure project that I was mentioning before would be a big part of that, because the idea of getting oil from Saudi Arabia or natural gas from Saudi Arabia out into the Mediterranean to Western Europe is a very attractive proposition, and whoever controls the waterway that those ships travel through would be making a great deal of money. So you can kind of see why they wouldn't want the people of Gaza around for that. But more importantly, I think, and this goes to the point I want to make for you, Brooke, Israel, the tactics have been strange. The strategy has been on point. They have taken out Hezbollah. They have dominated Iran. I don't know where all that's going, but Iran is not the threat that they were before. And without funding from Iran, Hamas is nothing. And the rest of the Arab world isn't going to fund the terrorists who are in Gaza the way they had before, because that funding mostly came, at least for the last 20 or 30 years, from Iran, and they're not in that game anymore. And I don't think that Hamas is going to be able to resurrect itself to be the threat that they were on October 6th ever again. Mm-hmm. And Hezbollah is not and never will be. And strategically, Israel has already won this. It's really just a matter of how are we cleaning this up, and how are we going to finish it. And I would suggest that Netanyahu is not the right guy to do it. That a new leader is needed. I really wish that they would pull together a coalition, but I understand also that Israel's number one concern is their own safety, and that they're not going to compromise their safety at this time, which Netanyahu uses to his advantage to stay in power.
So I have a question. Sorry, can I just ask my question, Mark, before I forget my question? Thank you. What about back in the past? I don't remember when this was, like in the 90s or something, where kids from Gaza, like the Palestinians, they might be throwing rocks at Israeli soldiers who would be shooting back with rubber bullets and stuff like that. If I'm remembering correctly, I mean, what was sparking all that would continue and over time, and then I suppose escalate slowly, and nothing was done that I can recall, or maybe stuff was being done, but it was ineffective to stop the the spiraling violence, and now here we are today.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
so
Mark.
I think what you're talking about is the Intifada, mostly on the West Bank, not so much in Gaza, although Gaza wasn't turned over to the Palestinians until I think 2005 or something like that. Yeah, I think what you're talking about is the Intifada. And
Mhm.
what they ended up doing was building a lot of walls, putting a lot of checkpoints in, choking off movement in the West Bank. Continues to this day, and that's how they have made peace, as I suppose you could call it, with the Palestinians of the West Bank.
I guess I kind of look at a little bit of history on some of these things. When Brooke mentioned rock throwing and rubber bullets, all I could think of was in Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
You had the IRA when the British were occupying, and the fact is if the British didn't occupy, there probably wouldn't have been an IRA.
Right.
It's always for every action there's a maybe not an equal reaction, but there's a reaction to these kind of things.
Right.
And this is where these kind of organizations spring up. I totally agree with Scott that in the idea of strategy, I think Israel has been spot on. I truly do think they've been spot on in their strategy. And we always said, we said this a year ago. It wasn't the matter of who was going to win this conflict. That, I think, was a foregone conclusion. The problem was going to be what happens next. That's where the real problem is. And what happens next, in a lot of ways, is up to the Palestinians. It truly is up to them. And that's why I was making the point of, finding that leadership that's willing to live in peace with their neighbors and live in peace in the areas that they're in. Very, very important. But at the same time, the rest of the world needs to make sure that there isn't some outside force, as is the case when I'm talking about the IRA in Ireland, where another Hamas can spring up, or where it's conceived that another Hezbollah or Hamas is necessary.
Yeah, or you're going to take children.
Correct.
And
we got to remember, these things are created because in response to something, be it real, sometimes it is, sometimes it's not, sometimes it's perceived. But these kinds of organizations come into being because there is a perception by the population that they need to exist. And for and I agree with you, Brooke, if you live in a war zone, yeah, there's PTSD. I honestly cannot see myself living in Israel because the fact that they're always shooting rockets from somewhere is coming into Israel. I mean, that population lives under that threat all the time. And unfortunately, and I talked to my brother-in-law and the family that is there, that's almost become normal to them in a way. That's kind of normal. And I can't see it. I mean, I can't see, me standing around in South Carolina waiting for somebody in Charlotte to be shooting rockets at me from an hour and a half away. I just can't see me being able to normalize it. But it does come down to, it is responsibility. However this is going to get cleaned up, and again, I'm not taking anything away from the Israelis' strategic plan and what they've done. I think they've done exactly what they thought they had to do to protect themselves. I think this is continuing on the way it's continuing on because once it's over with, they will kick Netanyahu out. So he needs to have this continue in some form or another. Again, he needs to be the answer, the response, the answer to something that's happening. That's why he stays in power today. He needs to be that answer. And once that condition that requires him in the minds of the people, be it real or be it perceived, once that's gone, he's out. I'm truly believe that he's out. So there is some responsibility for the rest of the world. There's a lot of responsibility for the Palestinians to be able to make this work, and relocating them somewhere is not the answer. It is not the standalone answer. It may be part of an answer, but there's so much more complexity to this, so much more interaction between who's your leader and the response of the rest of the world to the leadership that they select. And as I say, my hope is that, yes, Netanyahu gets booted out, Israel lives in peace, that they go through with the peace deal with Saudi Arabia, and everything is great there. I think that would be huge. And at the same time, I think for the Palestinians, basically the same thing. Remove the conditions that make them think that they need a Hamas, that make them think they need a Hezbollah. That, to me, it's one of the factors that if we do not consider, you're never going to have the peace that you want to have.
Yeah, I'm no expert on the Kurds, but I think if the Kurds were to move to South Sudan, that it would be a better transition for them, because they've never had a single state that they could look at and say, oh yes, that's Kurdistan, right? It's been part of Turkey, part of Iran, part of Syria, part of Iraq, and so they've never really clung onto a single piece of land as being theirs. They've wanted a big piece of all of those to form a country of their own. But the Palestinians have always identified. Now, we didn't call them Palestinians in the 1960s. We called them Arabs.
Correct.
Right?
Yes,
and they could be, and Arabs can go anywhere. Right. But once they began to identify as Palestinians, they were clearly tied to that strip of land between Lebanon and Egypt and Jordan, right? And so it's hard to picture somebody who identifies so closely with such a small piece of land that they could be moved anywhere else and retain an identity. Right. And so, it's probably unrealistic to think that they would be willingly displaced.
I agree. I mean, if we look at the history of this, the Romans could have a claim to Israel. I mean, these places have changed hands so many times by different empires throughout the history of things. It's very difficult to, now that we live in that nation state stage of civilization, and hopefully we'll eventually get out of it. Because these places have changed hands so many times, and there's a lot of people that believe that they have vested interests in some of these places. They truly believe they have vested interests, and that's a hard thing. To just like the Native Americans here in the United States, they have a vested interest on every single piece of property that we're standing on, and I can't blame them because they were here before we were, and hopefully, we'll see what happens. Anyway. That's it.
Yep. So thank you both. And thank you to all our listeners. We hope that you are subscribed. And if you have not yet subscribed on the platform of your choice, please do consider doing so. Subscribing is free and it will help support the channel. We do not have any paywalls. So thank you to Drs. Gershwer and Bound. And on behalf of the three of us, we thank you for supporting the Nova Society. And we'll see you again next time.
The Nova Society is a production of Nova Society Media, a division of the Phoenix Research Institute. We'd like to thank our production partners, Buzzsprout, who hosts the Nova Society, Audacity, our editing partners, Apple iTunes, the largest source of podcasts and music on the internet, Spotify, the most popular platform for the Nova Society, and iHeartRadio, your source for all things music and podcasting. The Nova Society is available on all of these and other quality platforms listed in our description. We'd also like to thank all of our listeners. Without your support, the Nova Society would not be possible. If you have a question or comment, we can be reached at nova.society.podcast@gmail.com. So for Dr. Brooklyn and Weldon, Dr. Scott Gershwer, and all of our production partners here at the Nova Society, I'm Dr. Mark Bound. Remember, the true power in society is knowledge. Thanks for listening, and we will see you again next time. We'd like to thank our sponsor for this episode, BH Conflict Resolution Services, a full-service dispute resolution firm offering expert, cost-effective mediation services to couples, groups, and businesses. BHCRS can be reached at www.bhcrs.com.